My name is Miranda Foster. I'm 32 years old, and for most of my adult life, I believe stability wasn't something you found. It was something you built, carefully, quietly, without leaving cracks that could collapse later. That belief shaped everything: my work, my routines, my relationships, especially my judgment. Or at least, I thought it did. The sentence that ended my relationship didn't sound like guilt. It didn't sound like regret. It sounded like correction. It was just one night. Stop acting like a victim. Daniel said it while leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed, like I was the one overreacting to something minor, like I had misunderstood the situation, like I needed perspective. I remember looking at him in that moment and feeling something shift, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like a structure giving way from the inside. "You're right," I said. My voice surprised even me. Calm, even. It was just one night. I paused, meeting his eyes. And this is just one breakup. That was the moment everything ended. Not when I saw the message. Not when I realized he had slept with someone else. But when he decided it wasn't a big deal. I stood up and walked toward the bedroom. No yelling, no crying. Just movement. People always imagine breakups like this are explosive. Raised voices, slamming doors, emotional speeches. There wasn't any of that. Just me, moving through my own life like I had finally understood what it was worth. Daniel followed me down the hallway, his footsteps quick, irritated. "Miranda, seriously?" He said. "You're being dramatic." I didn't answer. I opened the closet, pulled out a suitcase, and set it on the bed. The zipper sounded louder than it should have. "You're actually packing?" He scoffed. "Over this?" "Over this." I almost laughed. But instead I started folding my clothes. Methodical, precise, the same way I approached everything. Because if I stopped moving, I might start feeling. And I didn't want to feel yet. I met Daniel 5 years ago. Back then, he was magnetic in a way I couldn't explain. Not loud, not flashy, just sharp, ambitious. The kind of man who always seemed like he was chasing something bigger. I was the opposite. Structured, grounded, predictable. And somehow it worked. At least that's what I told myself. When he lost his job 2 years ago, I covered our rent without hesitation. I adjusted my budget, picked up extra work, made sure he didn't feel the pressure. When I was offered a promotion that required relocating, I turned it down. He didn't want to start over in a new city while rebuilding his career, so I stayed. For him, I helped him polish his resume, ran mock interviews, introduced him to people in my network. I told myself that's what partnership looked like. You build together, but that only works if both people are building the same thing. The last few months, something had shifted. Daniel started coming home later. At first, it was small things. Team dinner, client drinks, networking event, reasonable explanations. I didn't question them. I trusted him. But then the nights got longer. The excuses got thinner. And the way he looked at me changed. Like I was familiar in a way that bored him. You're always so predictable, Miranda," he said once, casually, scrolling through his phone. "Don't you ever want to just do something unexpected?" I remember smiling, trying to keep it light. I thought stability was a good thing. He didn't look up. Yeah, for a while. That should have been the moment I asked more questions. But I didn't, because I believed in what we had. So I tried harder. Planned spontaneous dinners, bought him small gifts, suggested weekend trips. He went along with it, but it felt like I was performing for someone who had already stopped watching. Then came the night before everything broke. He had a company holiday party. I stayed home, working late on a project deadline. When he came back, it was past midnight. He smelled like alcohol and something unfamiliar. Not perfume exactly, just something that didn't belong to me. "Good night?" I asked, half asleep. "Yeah," he mumbled. "Fun." That was it. No details. No stories. Just distance. The next morning, I was in the kitchen making coffee when his phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't pick it up immediately. 5 years together does something to you. You stop thinking of boundaries the same way. His life felt like an extension of mine. So when I glanced at the screen, it wasn't suspicion. It was habit. The message preview lit up. "Lena, work. Last night was wild. Can't wait for round 2. My body reacted before my mind did. A drop in my stomach so sudden it felt like the floor disappeared beneath me. Lena, his ex-girlfriend. The one he said he was completely over. The one who had recently joined his company. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I just stood there, staring at the screen until it went dark again. Then I poured the coffee, sat down, and waited. When Daniel finally walked into the kitchen, hair messy, still half asleep, I was already sitting at the table, his phone in front of me. "Morning," he said, reaching for a mug. "Sit down," I said quietly. Something in my voice made him pause. He looked at me, then at the phone. Slowly, he sat. I slid the phone across the table toward him. What's this about? My voice was steady, controlled. I just wanted the truth. He glanced at the screen. For a second, just a second, there was hesitation. Then it vanished, replaced by something else. Annoyance. Oh, come on, Miranda, he said, leaning back. It was just one night. There it was. No denial, no apology. Just dismissal. We were drunk. Things got out of hand at the party, he continued, waving his hand like he was brushing away a minor inconvenience. Stop acting like a victim. It's not like I planned it. I stared at him. You slept with her. He rolled his eyes. Yeah, I did, but it's not a big deal. Not a big deal. 5 years. Reduced to that. We've been together forever, he added. Things get stale. Lena she gets it. The energy, the ambition. You're always so safe. Safe. The word hit harder than I expected. I thought about the promotion I turned down, the nights I stayed up helping him, the way I made sure our life never fell apart while he figured his out. And now, that was being framed as a flaw. A break, I repeated slowly when he said it. Yeah, he said like it was obvious. A break from routine, from this. He gestured vaguely around the apartment, around me, around the life we built. I felt something settle inside me then. Not anger, not even sadness, just clarity. Tell me why it happened, I said quietly. He shrugged. Fine, we've been flirting for weeks. It just escalated. It was exciting, spontaneous. Exciting. Spontaneous. Words he had once used to describe me. And you're overreacting, he added. People cheat all the time. It's human. If you loved me, you'd forgive it and move on. Don't turn this into some tragedy. That was the moment. Not the cheating, not the message, but that. The expectation that I would accept it, minimize it, shrink myself to accommodate his choices. I nodded slowly and stood up. I stood up so slowly it almost looked calm. Maybe it was calm. Or maybe it was the kind of stillness that only happens when something inside you has already shattered and your body is the last part to understand it. Daniel frowned as I walked past him toward the bedroom. Miranda, he called after me, irritation sharpening his voice. Don't do this dramatic silent thing. We're talking. No, I thought. You're explaining. You're justifying. You're trying to force your version of this over mine before I have time to name what actually happened. I didn't say any of that out loud. I opened the closet, pulled out the navy suitcase we used for long trips, and laid it flat across the bed. For one strange second, I remembered us packing it for Seattle 2 summers earlier. He had folded everything terribly. I had teased him for rolling dress shirts like socks. He kissed my forehead and said I worried too much about wrinkles. It is strange what the mind reaches for when it's trying not to drown. Are you serious? He asked from the doorway. I started folding sweaters. He laughed then, but there was a strain underneath it now. A nervousness he was trying to cover with disbelief. You're really leaving? Over one mistake? I placed another sweater into the suitcase and finally answered. No, I'm leaving because you think this is small. That shut him up for about 3 seconds. Then he pushed off the doorframe and stepped into the room. You always do this, he said. You take one bad moment and turn it into some moral referendum. I almost smiled at the phrasing. Moral referendum. Daniel loved words that made him sound smarter than he was when he was cornered. I zipped a pouch of toiletries and tucked it into the side compartment. One bad moment, I repeated. You slept with your ex. He exhaled through his nose, already tired of my reaction. Lena isn't my ex in any real sense anymore. We dated years ago. That's not the point. I looked at him then. The point. I wondered what world he was living in where the labels were the issue and not the betrayal underneath them. She works with you now, I said. You hid that you were flirting with her. You slept with her, and then you told me to stop acting like a victim. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing now. Because that's what you're doing, Miranda. You're making this huge because you need everything to be this clean, structured story where one person is right and one person is wrong. I stared at him. There it was again. Not remorse, not even guilt. Just impatience that I wasn't cooperating with the version of events that protected him from a discomfort. You are wrong, I said. The sentence landed harder than I expected. He looked at me like I had slapped him. For a second, the room was quiet except for the sound of a car passing outside and the faint rattle of the heater kicking on. Then he changed tactics. His shoulders dropped. His voice softened. Look, he said, I know I handled this badly. Handled this. Not did this, not chose this, handled this. It was the party. Everyone was drinking. Lena and I were talking and it just happened. And nothing just happens, I said. His jaw tightened. You know what I mean. No, I said, closing the suitcase halfway. Actually, I don't. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were back on the same side now, like intimacy could be switched on whenever it served him. "We've been off for months," he said. "You know that. You felt it too." I did feel it, but feeling distance and using it as permission are not the same thing. "We were struggling," he continued. "I've been trying to tell you that." I let out a small, humorless breath. "You called me predictable. You called our life stale. That's not trying." His eyes flashed. "Because it's true." That one almost got me. Not because I believed it, but because part of me had spent months trying to fix exactly that. Surprise reservations, last-minute weekend drives, tickets to things he liked, trying to become more flexible, more sparkling, more whatever he had decided I wasn't enough of. And still, there he stood, speaking as if my failure to entertain him had pushed him into another woman's arms. He saw something shift in my face and mistook it for doubt, so he pressed harder. "Lena understands my world," he said. "She's ambitious. She's sharp. She's not content just playing it safe all the time." The silence that followed felt almost holy. Because that was the truth, finally. Not that it was one drunken mistake. Not that it was meaningless. He had already built a story in his mind where I represented limitation, and Lena represented escape. And now he was careless enough to say it plainly. I nodded once. "Then you should be with Lena." His expression changed immediately. That startled him. He had expected pain, maybe bargaining, maybe tears. Something that would keep him in the position of being chosen, not release. "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped. "That's not what I'm saying." It sounded exactly like what you're saying. He swore under his breath and began pacing again. Faster now. The polished confidence was slipping. "God, Miranda, this is what I mean. You hear one thing and go nuclear. We have 5 years together. 5. And you're throwing it away because I messed up once?" I closed the suitcase zipper fully. "No," I said again. "You threw it away. I'm just refusing to crawl under the wreckage and pretend it still looks like home." He stared at me. I think that was the first moment he realized I might really go. His voice lost some of its edge after that. "Come on," he said more quietly. "Don't do this." There it was, the first crack. I lifted the suitcase off the bed and rolled it into the hallway. He followed immediately. "Miranda, stop. At least talk to me like a person." I turned toward him so suddenly he almost walked into me. "A person?" I said. My voice was still quiet, but something underneath it had sharpened. "You told me your cheating wasn't a big deal. You told me to stop acting like a victim. You compared me to the woman you slept with, and somehow you think I'm the one who stopped acting like a person?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time that morning, he had no polished answer. I walked into the living room and reached for my laptop bag. That seemed to finally scare him. His face changed. The arrogance fell away, and in its place came something frantic. "Wait," he said, stepping between me and the door. "I said I was sorry." "No," I replied, "you didn't." He blinked. I kept going. "You explained. You minimized. You defended yourself. But you never actually said you were sorry." For a second, he looked like he might. Like maybe now he would say the words. But even then, even with his back against the wall, his pride got there first. "This doesn't have to destroy us," he said. "Adults work through things." I almost laughed. Adults. As if adulthood meant tolerating humiliation so the guilty person could avoid consequences. My hand tightened around the strap of my bag. "I am working through it," I said. "I'm leaving." His eyes went bright with anger then, a fast flare of it. "So that's it?" he asked. "You don't even want to fight for us?" "Fight for us." I looked at him and thought very clearly, I already did, for years. In rent payments, in career sacrifices, in patience, in loyalty. In every quiet thing no one applauds because it looks too ordinary to count. "I was fighting for us while you were texting her," I said. That landed. He looked away first. And then, because people like Daniel often reach for whatever tool is closest when charm fails, he tried guilt. "Oh, what about everything I've done for you?" he asked. "You're just going to erase that?" I saw it then. The panic underneath everything else. Not heartbreak. Not real grief. Loss of access. Loss of stability. Loss of someone who made his chaos survivable. "I'm not erasing anything," I said. "I'm seeing it clearly." He followed me outside barefoot, still talking. The morning air was cold enough to sting. The driveway still held the damp gray look of early winter. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. A garage door opened. Ordinary sounds. A normal morning. That almost felt offensive. I loaded the suitcase into the trunk while Daniel stood a few feet away, his breath visible in the air. "Miranda, please," he said, and now his voice had changed again. Softer, urgent. "I don't want this. I want us. We can fix this. I'll cut her off. I'll leave the job if I have to. if I have to. Not because it was wrong, because it cost him something. I opened the driver's door. He moved closer. Say something, he said. Don't just leave like this. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. The man I had loved for 5 years. The man I had defended, supported, built around. And for the first time, I saw someone smaller than the role he had occupied in my life. Not powerful, not tragic, just small. You made your choice, I said. His face crumpled for half a second before anger rushed in to protect it. So you're just perfect, right? He shot back. You've never failed me. You've never made me feel trapped. There it was again. The rewriting. The scramble to dilute responsibility by turning betrayal into mutual dissatisfaction. I got into the car. He leaned toward the open door, desperation and fury blending together. You'll regret walking out without trying. I started the engine. No, I said. I'll regret staying after finally understanding. Then I closed the door. As I pulled away, I saw him in the rearview mirror, barefoot on the driveway, still talking, still gesturing, still trying to turn my leaving into a conversation he could win. I didn't roll the window down. I didn't look back again. The hardest part wasn't the drive. It was what came after. The quiet. The terrible, unnatural quiet that settles in when your whole future changes shape in under an hour and your body has nowhere to put the shock. I drove across town to Jason and Clara's place. Jason had been my friend since college, one of those rare people who could be blunt without being cruel. Clara was warm in that steady, observant way that made you feel seen even when you wanted to disappear. They opened the door before I knocked twice. Jason looked at the suitcase, then at my face. Oh, he said softly. Come in. That was all. No barrage of questions, no forced comfort, just space. And somehow that kindness almost broke me more than Daniel's cruelty had. I slept on their couch that night without really sleeping. Every time I drifted off, I heard his voice again. It was just one night. Stop acting like a victim. By morning, those words had started doing what cruel words do when they come from someone you loved. They had started to burrow. Was I too rigid? Too safe? Too easy to take for granted? I lay there staring at the ceiling while pale light crept through the curtains, and I could feel my mind trying to negotiate with the pain, trying to find my mistake because if I had made one, then maybe the world still made sense. But another thought kept rising through the noise. Even if I had been boring, stable, predictable, difficult, tired, distracted, none of that made betrayal reasonable. There is no personality flaw that earns deception. That realization didn't heal me, but it stopped the bleeding from becoming self-hatred. The next few days passed in a blur of exhaustion and numb routines. I called in sick to work. Clara made tea I barely drank. Jason brought takeout and pretended not to notice when I left most of it untouched. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't text him. I didn't ask for explanations. Because somewhere under the grief, I already understood the most important part. Anything he said now would be for him, not for me. By the end of the week, I started doing small things just to prove I still existed outside what happened. I updated my resume. I reapplied for the senior engineering position I had turned down the year before. I signed up at a gym near Jason's neighborhood, not because I was trying to transform, but because I needed somewhere to put the adrenaline that kept waking me at 3 a.m. I booked a therapy consultation after staring at the number for 2 days before calling. None of it felt brave. It felt mechanical. But sometimes survival starts that way. One necessary motion after another. Weeks passed. Then months. I found a small apartment in a quieter part of the city. 1 bedroom. Lots of light. Bare walls. A kitchen too narrow for more than one person, which for a while felt like mercy. At first, the emptiness echoed. Then slowly, it began to feel like peace. I got the promotion. The one I had once set aside so Daniel wouldn't feel uprooted. When the offer came through, I sat at my desk staring at the email for a full minute before I cried. Not because I was happy exactly. Because I realized how much of myself I had been postponing. Therapy helped in ways I couldn't have explained back then. Not dramatically, not all at once. Just enough to help me separate grief from guilt. One afternoon, after I spent nearly an hour listing all the ways I might have contributed to the collapse of the relationship, my therapist looked at me and said, very gently, "Being imperfect is not the same thing as deserving betrayal." I wrote that down later. And while I was learning how to live in my own life again, I started hearing things about Daniel. Not because I went looking, but because stories like that don't stay contained, especially when work, an ex-girlfriend, and a holiday party are involved. The first hint came from Jason over coffee one Saturday morning. He hesitated before mentioning it, like he wasn't sure whether I wanted to know. Clara heard through the mutual friend that Daniel's situation at work was getting messy, he said carefully. Apparently, the thing with Lena didn't end with that night. I looked down at my cup. Of course it didn't. He kept talking, slowly, like he was placing each fact where it couldn't cut too deep. People started noticing. There were rumors, something about favoritism. HR got dragged in. I didn't say much. But somewhere deep inside, a cold, sad understanding settled further into place. Because the people who call betrayal small are usually the same people who are stunned when consequences refuse to stay that way. The story of what happened to Daniel didn't come to me all at once. It arrived in pieces. Fragments passed across coffee tables, half-finished sentences from mutual friends, things Jason hesitated to say, things Clara softened before repeating. I never asked for it, but I didn't stop it either. Because part of moving on is understanding what you left behind, not to reopen it, but to confirm you were right to walk away. Apparently, the one night didn't stay one night. Daniel and Lena kept seeing each other. At first quietly, then less quietly. Office parties, late nights, closed-door meetings that stretched longer than they should have. People noticed. They always do. And once people start noticing, stories grow faster than truth can contain them. Lena was strategic, Jason said one evening, leaning back against the kitchen counter, while Clara rinsed dishes beside him. That's what I heard. Strategic. It fit. The kind of word Daniel would have admired before realizing he was on the receiving end of it. She used him, Clara added gently, for access, client information, internal details. I nodded slowly. Of course she did. He had called it ambition, called it energy, called it something I lacked. That same quality had simply turned direction. Did it work? I asked, surprising myself. Jason shrugged. For a while, she got what she needed. There was a promotion involved. Then things got messy. Messy. Another small word for something that probably wasn't small at all. Rumors escalated. HR got involved. There were questions about favoritism, about confidentiality, about professional boundaries that had clearly been crossed. Daniel wasn't fired, but he wasn't untouched either. He got passed over for advancement, reassigned to less visible projects. The kind of quiet, professional exile that doesn't show up on paper, but reshapes your trajectory anyway. And Lena? She moved departments, Clara said. New team, new manager, clean slate. Of course she did. People like her don't burn down their own exit. They leave before the fire reaches them. And Daniel, I asked? Jason hesitated. Not great, he admitted. People talk, you know how it is. Once your name gets tied to that kind of thing. I did know. Reputation isn't just what you do. It's what people believe you're capable of doing. And once that shifts, it rarely shifts back. I listened to all of it without the sharp emotional spikes I would have felt months earlier. No anger. No satisfaction either. Just distance. Like hearing about someone I used to know. Weeks after that conversation, the first message came. An email, sent to my work address. The subject line was simple. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. I miss us. I miss the routines, the quiet, the way things felt stable. Work has been difficult. I didn't realize how much I relied on your perspective until it was gone. Can we meet for coffee? Just talk, no pressure. Daniel, I read it once. Then again, there it was. Not I'm sorry. Not I hurt you. Just I miss what you provided. I closed the email and deleted it. No reply. No acknowledgement. Nothing. A week later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered without thinking. Hello? Silence. Then a voice I recognized. Miranda? I closed my eyes for a brief second. Don't call this number again, I said and hung up. He tried again from a different number 2 days later. This time I didn't answer. The voicemail he left was longer. Look, I know you're avoiding me, he said, voice tight. But that's not fair. We had something real. You can't just erase 5 years because of one mistake. I've been trying to give you space, but at some point, you have to be an adult about this. I deleted it, then blocked the number. That should have been the end of it. But people like Daniel don't give up when silence doesn't reward them. They escalate. A few days later, his mother called. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. Miranda, she said, her voice already thick with something between concern and accusation. I'm glad you picked up. I didn't respond immediately. I've been hearing things, she continued, about Daniel, about what happened between you two. Of course she had. Stories travel fast. They're saying he's struggling, she went on. Not eating, not sleeping. He's lost weight. He's not himself. I leaned back against my kitchen counter, staring out the window. And there it was. The pivot. He made a mistake, she said. People do that. But shutting him out completely, that's cruel, Miranda. Be the bigger person. I almost laughed. Not out of humor, out of recognition. Because this wasn't about concern. It was about restoring balance, putting things back the way they were, putting me back in the role that made his life manageable. "This isn't your business," I said calmly. "Of course it is," she snapped. "He's my son." "And he was my partner," I replied. Past tense. There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened. "Forgiveness is what adults do." "No," I said quietly. "Accountability is what adults do." I ended the call before she could respond, and blocked that number too. After that, the messages shifted. New numbers, shorter texts, more desperate. "It's me. Please just hear me out. I saw you got the promotion. Congratulations. I always knew you'd do it. I'm proud of you, even if you hate me." I didn't respond. Then the tone changed again. More raw, more revealing. "Lena was a mistake. She used me, spread rumors. I lost everything because of it. I'm barely holding things together right now. You always said we support each other. I need that now." That one sat on my screen longer than the others, because it was honest in a way the earlier messages weren't. Not about remorse, about need. And that clarity made my decision easier. I deleted it. 3 days later, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a brief, irrational second, I thought it might be a package, or Clara dropping by unannounced. I opened the door without checking, and there he was. Daniel, standing in the hallway like a memory that hadn't gotten the message. He looked different, not dramatically, but enough. His posture slightly slouched, his face thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His confidence, the thing that had always defined him, was muted. "Miranda," he said, like he had been holding that word in for weeks. "Thank God." My hand tightened slightly on the edge of the door. "How did you get this address?" He hesitated. "A friend," he said. I needed to see you." I didn't invite him in. There's nothing to talk about," I said. He stepped forward anyway, words already spilling out. "Yes, there is. I was wrong. About everything." I stayed where I was, listening, not engaging. "Lena, she wasn't what I thought," he continued. "She twisted things at work, spread rumors. People turned on me. I lost projects, opportunities. Everything started falling apart." His voice cracked slightly. "I didn't realize how much I had until it was gone." There it was again. Not what he did, what he lost. "You were my constant," he said. "The one person who never made things harder." I almost smiled at that, because it was true, and because he still didn't understand why that mattered. "I need you," he said finally. Need. Not love. Not respect. Need. "I know I messed up," he added quickly, "but we can fix this. I'll change. Therapy, boundaries, whatever it takes. Just give me another chance." Tears started forming in his eyes, real ones this time. And for a moment, I studied him. Not the version I loved. The version in front of me now. Stripped of certainty. Stripped of advantage. Stripped of the illusion that he could choose and still keep everything. And I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just absence. "Daniel," I said quietly, "you didn't lose me because of Lena." He blinked. "You lost me because of how you treated me when I found out." He opened his mouth to respond, but I kept going. "You didn't apologize. You dismissed it. You told me to stop acting like a victim. You made me feel like loyalty was something childish." His expression shifted, from pleading to defensive. "I was overwhelmed," he said. "I didn't handle it well." "No," I said. "You showed me exactly how you think." That hit, harder than anything else, because it wasn't about one moment. It was about perspective. "I've changed," he insisted. "Everything that happened after. You don't understand how much I've learned." "I do understand," I said. "You learned that actions have consequences." His face hardened. So that's it?" he asked. "You're just going to throw me away when I'm trying to fix things?" There it was, the shift. From regret to accusation. I stepped back slightly, creating space. "I'm not throwing you away," I said calmly. "I'm respecting the decision you already made." His frustration snapped into anger. "You didn't even fight for us," he said. "You just walked out." I held his gaze. "I fought for us for 5 years." Silence. Heavy, unavoidable. And in that silence, I realized something final. He still didn't see me. He saw loss. He saw inconvenience. He saw consequences. But he didn't see me. "I'm not coming back," I said. He stared at me like I had just confirmed something he didn't want to believe. Then his expression shifted again, hurt twisting into something sharper. "Fine," he said. "Walk away. Pretend you're better than me." I didn't respond. Because this wasn't about being better. It was about being done. "Just remember," he added, bitterness creeping in, "you're not perfect either." "I never said I was," I replied. I closed the door gently, not slammed, not rushed. just closed. And on the other side of it, for the first time since everything began, I felt something settle completely. Not healing, not yet, but certainty. And that was enough. 9 months later, I stood in the middle of a park strung with warm lights, the late afternoon sun dipping just low enough to turn everything soft and gold. Jason and Clara's wedding was exactly what you'd expect from them. Intimate, thoughtful, no excess. Just people who actually mattered, gathered in one place, celebrating something real. For a long time, I didn't think I would be able to enjoy something like that again. Not without comparing it to what I lost. Not without wondering how something that looked so stable could collapse so completely. But standing there, holding a glass of champagne, listening to laughter ripple across the tables, I realized something had shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. The same way everything important seems to change. Hey, a voice said beside me. I turned and Ethan smiled. Ethan Cole. We had been seeing each other for a couple of months. Nothing rushed, nothing overwhelming, just steady. He wasn't loud. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He listened. He noticed things. And when he spoke, it felt intentional. Not like he was performing, but like he actually meant what he said. How are you holding up? He asked, glancing toward the ceremony area where Jason was nervously adjusting his tie. I'm good, I said, and I meant it. Not good as in pretending. Not good as in managing. Actually good. Ethan studied my face for a second, like he was checking whether I believed my own answer. Then he nodded. Okay, he said simply. No probing, no pressure. That alone felt new. We moved toward one of the tables as guests began settling in for the reception. Music drifted through the air. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed too loudly near the bar. It felt normal. Safe. And for the first time in a long time, normal didn't feel like something lacking. It felt like something earned. We were halfway through a conversation about nothing important. Travel plans, a book he was reading, when I felt it. That subtle shift in the atmosphere. The kind you don't notice consciously at first. Just a quiet tightening. A few glances in one direction. A hesitation in someone's laugh. I followed the movement of the room without thinking. And then I saw him. Daniel, standing near the edge of the reception, just beyond the main circle of guests. He wasn't supposed to be there. Jason had made that very clear. For a second, I thought maybe I was mistaken. But then he turned slightly and the light caught his face. No, it was him. And he looked diminished. Not just physically, though he was thinner, his suit hanging a little looser than it should. But something else, something less visible. The certainty he used to carry so effortlessly was gone, replaced by something uncertain, searching. He didn't approach immediately. He lingered, talking to someone I barely recognized, smiling in that careful, practiced way people use when they're trying to reinsert themselves into a space they no longer belong to. Ethan noticed the shift in my attention. Do you know him? He asked quietly. I nodded once. Yes. He followed my gaze, then looked back at me. Do you want to leave? He asked. The fact that he offered that without hesitation, without making it about himself, settled something in me. No, I said. I took a small breath. I'm okay. And I was. That surprised me more than seeing Daniel, because a few months ago that moment would have unraveled me. Now, it just felt like an unexpected chapter I had already finished reading. Daniel saw me then. I could tell by the way his posture changed. Subtle, but immediate. His shoulders straightened slightly. His expression sharpened, focused. And then he started walking toward me. Ethan didn't move. He stayed exactly where he was, calm, present, waiting for my lead. That mattered, more than I could explain in that moment. Miranda, Daniel said when he reached us. My name sounded different coming from him now, like it belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. Congratulations, he added quickly. To Jason and Clara, I mean. Thank you, I said politely. Ethan stood beside me, quiet but unmistakably there. Daniel's eyes flicked to him. Hi, Ethan said, offering a small, neutral nod. Daniel, he replied. The exchange was brief, measured. Then Daniel turned back to me. Can we talk? He asked. There was something in his voice, not just urgency, something closer to desperation. I glanced at Ethan. He met my eyes, then gave a small nod. Your call. That was all. I turned back to Daniel. Briefly, I said. We stepped away from the table, moving toward a quieter area near the edge of the park where the lights were dimmer and the noise softened into background hum. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Up close, the changes were clearer, the lines around his eyes deeper, his hands restless, fingers brushing against each other like he couldn't keep them still. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said finally. It's Jason's wedding, I replied. Of course I came. He nodded, like that made sense, then ran a hand through his hair. I had to see you, he said. I didn't respond. He took a breath. Everything fell apart after you left, he said. Not just work, everything. I waited. Because I already knew this part. I thought I could handle it, he continued. The rumors, the fallout, but it just kept getting worse. Lena, she... He stopped himself, shaking his head. It doesn't matter. The point is, I was wrong. There it was. Finally. Simple. Direct. I know that doesn't fix anything, he added quickly. But I need you to understand that I see it now. I see what I did. I see what I lost. Lost. Still that word. I've been trying to rebuild, he said. But it's different without you. Harder. Everything feels unstable. Of course it does. Because I had been the one holding it steady. I moved back in with my parents, he went on. Work hasn't recovered. People don't trust me the same way. He let out a short, humorless breath. I don't even trust myself the same way. For a moment, there was silence. And in that silence, I could see it. He wasn't performing anymore. This was real. His consequences had finally caught up to him in a way he couldn't talk his way out of. I miss you, he said. I met his eyes. I miss us. There it was. The final attempt. Not manipulation this time. Not entirely. Just longing mixed with regret. But even that felt different now. Because I could finally see it clearly. He didn't miss me. He missed what I gave him. The stability. The support. The version of himself that existed when I was absorbing the weight. I need another chance, he said quietly. There it was. The ask. The thing everything else had been building toward. I took a breath. And for a second, I searched myself. Not for doubt, but for any lingering attachment. Any part of me that still wanted what we had. There was nothing. Not emptiness. Just absence. Daniel, I said. My voice was calm. Steady. The same way it had been the morning everything ended. It was just one relationship. He blinked. Confusion flickering across his face. What? I held his gaze. Stop acting like a victim. The words landed between us. Heavy. Unavoidable. His face went pale. That's not, he started. That's not fair. I tilted my head slightly. Isn't it? He stared at me. For a second I could see it. The recognition. The memory of what he had said to me. How easily he had dismissed my pain. How casually he had reduced something significant into something small. That was different, he said weakly. It wasn't, I replied. Silence stretched. The kind that doesn't need to be filled. I'm not saying this to hurt you, I continued. I'm saying it because it's true. He swallowed. His hands tightened into fists at his sides. I built a life without you, I said. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, just because I had to. I gestured lightly toward the reception. I have peace now. Real connections. People who show up without making me question my worth. His eyes flicked in the direction of Ethan. And he's part of that? Daniel asked, something sharp creeping back into his tone. Yes, I said simply. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to process something that didn't fit the narrative he had been holding on to. I can be better, he said after a moment. I am better. I believed him, in a way. But it didn't matter. That's good, I said. And I meant it. Just not for me. His expression shifted again, hope slipping into frustration. So that's it, he asked. You've just moved on? Yes. The simplicity of that answer seemed to hit harder than anything else. Because there was no drama in it, no hesitation. Just truth. He let out a breath, shaking his head slightly. I really thought, he started, then stopped. What? I asked gently. That you'd come back, he admitted. Of course he did. Because people like him believe the foundation will always be there, waiting, no matter how many times they step away from it. I didn't, I said. Another pause. Then something in him snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, like something giving way. Then I guess there's nothing left to say, he said. No, I agreed. There isn't. He looked at me for a long moment, like he was trying to memorize something, or maybe understand something too late. Then he nodded once and stepped back. I watched him walk away, past the lights, past the music, back toward the edges of a place he was never meant to be in anymore. And I didn't feel anything break, no ache, no pull, just completion. I turned and walked back to the table. Ethan looked up as I approached. Everything okay? He asked. I took my seat beside him. Yeah, I said. And this time there was no hesitation at all. Everything's good. He reached for my hand under the table. Not tightly, not possessively, just there. And I let myself settle into that, into something steady, something chosen, something mutual. Across the park, laughter rose again. Glasses clinked. Someone called for the couple to kiss. Life continued, as it always does. And for the first time, I wasn't thinking about what I had lost. I was thinking about what I had built.